Welcome everybody to Stone Building Solutions. This is our third of our webinar series. We ended the last year with 2 senators and a gemstone. This year we're picking it back up with our lawmakers. I'm so thrilled to have our incredible panel today. On our panel, we have House Representative Vicki Lopez from South Florida. I have watched Vicki from afar and been a big admirer of everything she's been doing for quite a long time. She has been a huge trailblazer and advocate for condominiums. We have this huge state of Florida, and the majority of the condominiums are in her district, and she is kind of fighting for your rights and doing everything that she can up there in Tallahassee to make these things happen. And then Jennifer Bradley now all of a sudden couldn't make it at the last minute. And Travis, I'm sorry you're not as beautiful as Jennifer Bradley, but we're
not even
have you.
Close. Thanks. It's good to be here. I'm like, between Senator Bradley and Representative Lopez, you, Jamie, I'm definitely the ugly duckling of this panel, but I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, Travis, for those that you don't know, he is our lobbyist for CAI. Travis has been instrumental in helping the lawmakers craft these laws, giving perspective from management companies, from condo owners. He is our voice as residents and vendors who specialize in the space. And I've heard the lawmakers refer to Travis, and his work through CAI has been a big help. So we are very lucky to have you. And then it is my absolute pleasure to announce Jamie Ballard. Jamie is former CAI president, current president-elect for CAI for her local chapter, and vice president of management and associates. She's been several decades in the management space, in the condo space. So her insights from management perspective will get us started. Guys, to kick us off, the biggest thing that we're seeing is all these articles out there that condo availability is going up. They're sitting on the market longer. We're starting to see prices dip. Do you think that these laws impacting us is going to cause the next condo crash? Have you put laws on us that are now going to affect if people can still live in a condo?
I'll take an initial stab at it, and I think no. If regardless of what laws, and I think there are very good ones that have been passed that will help provide for obviously the maintenance and the building, the strong building components that are necessary for these buildings, where we house so many of our residents choose to live in these buildings. Insurance lenders, they all would have required these types of proof of maintenance being done. So I think given those economics, and I think we would have seen certainly those requirements would have been placed on buildings, whether or not it was to try to get your insurance or to try to get a mortgage in that building, or to try to get, whether or not you now have to follow the law. So and then I also just think, a lot of these buildings have reached their, if you're not maintaining a 50-year-old building that's on the water, you have a choice to make. Either you're going to have to spend a lot of money to get it up to level, or the decision might be, do we terminate, all of us as neighbors? Do we terminate and move on? And those are honestly, those are discussions that are real discussions that are happening right now.
What we're going to cover today is we're going to cover 3 parts of this. First off, we're going to cover condo safety, what's new with the milestones, recertifications, and the structural integrity reserves studies after this last session. In December, we were talking about, is there going to be money? Senator Pizzo was very clear that there wasn't going to be a bailout. Vicki and Pizzo and Bradley has come together, and they have found a way to put funds in front of condos. It becomes with a little complexity. So we're going to tell you how to get that money and what money is available, and then go over governance in terms of what are the new requirements. And I started this with kind of a surrealism imagery because I know this is kind of how we're feeling. We're seeing all these costs rising, and Travis just talked about insurance and banking. And this is really what we're trying to advocate. We're into a new world of condo living. And the changes here, guys, we're going to talk about the laws that are happening, whether everyone likes them or not. At Stone Building Solutions, just to kind of introduce myself, I'm Tara Stone. I'm the CEO of Stone Building Solutions. We provide engineering, reserve studies, insurance valuation appraisals, and damage claims. But ultimately, it's our duty and our responsibility to help our associations through this difficult time. We need to move everyone into fiscal and structural building safety and help, and we have the highest standards to do that. And these webinars and the education is just the first step in helping the membership understand what's going on. So once you understand the rules, then you can make decisions. Everything that we're talking about today is how we can make the decisions so that you as an owner can decide, do I have to move? Am I going to stay? How much is it going to cost? And then you can actually make decisions based on information instead of unknowing. Milestones?
Yes, so Senate Bill 154 that passed in the 2023 legislative session actually said that if your building is 30 years or older and you are a 3-story residential condominium, you have to have your milestones completed by 12/31/2024. Now, if you're on here by Dade or Broward or some of the cities in Palm Beach County, your county ordinances, at least in Broward and in Miami-Dade, have been recertifying buildings since 1997. And they do an even stricter job of recertifying, because they recertify all buildings, not just condo buildings. But for them, you know, they have been very proactive in the recertification. They have now, since last year, dropped it to 30 years, and they are in the process of dropping it to 25 years because Senate Bill 154 gave authority to all local governments to decide for themselves if they wanted to stay at 30 or go to 25. So that was one of the great changes, I would say, of Senate Bill 154. It also mandated that any residential condominium 3 stories and above must complete a structural integrity reserve study by year end as well, by 12/31/24. And they must include in their budgets, beginning on or after January 1st of 2025, those reserves that are indicated and identified in the SIRS report. So it kind of goes hand in hand because obviously the inspection is to ensure that your building is safe now. The SIRS is a more prospective tool that tells you, you know, what will you need in the future? What will you have to be reserving in the future? And I think for many people in the 65 other counties that did not have recertification processes, I'm afraid that since they have to have the structural integrity reserve study prior to any milestone inspection, if they haven't reached 30 years yet, they may find that the SIRS is actually going to be like an instrument that shows repairs that have to be done immediately, like like a special assessment. So it's going to kind of be twofold, I think, in many ways, because if there are things structurally that must be done now, they'll have to do them now. And then moving forward, other structural elements that haven't yet expired in terms of their useful life, that will be included in the SIRS report as well.
That's what we're finding when we have buildings that are under 30 years. Now, just to bring everyone up to speed, all built condos, 3 stories or more, regardless of age, must complete the structural integrity reserve study by December 31st, 2024. I know coming into this session, there was a lot of talk that you guys were going to change that it was going to say contracted by December 2024. It was a little surprising to see that change didn't go through. Can you give us some insight to what the conversations were about that?
Yes, so that was a point of kind of an important point for the Senate. Senator Bradley wanted to she was concerned that there would not be enough professionals to actually complete the SIRS by 12/31/2024. So her thought was much like the milestone, because the milestone inspections also allow for, if you're contracted by 12/31/2024, you will be in compliance with the law. With the SIRS, it appears that the House leadership said, look, we're not going to give anybody any more runway. They have to complete them. They should have completed them. So for the House's position, they said, look, they've known since 2023 that they're going to have to do these structural integrity reserve studies. We've given them all the way through 2025, because in fact, if you don't pass your budgets until December of 2025, you don't start reserving till the beginning of 2026. So the House thought that's more than enough time to be responsible and be in compliance. And so they refused to accept the Senate's recommendation on contracted by 12/31/2024.
Travis, did you have any insight to add on condo safety before we kind of move on?
No, other than just briefly to say that if to kind of, I guess, piggyback on what Representative Lopez said, if you were waiting around as an association saying, I know that this has to be done, I've been given plenty of time and notice, but I'm not going to do it because I think the legislature is going to say, oh, sorry, we were just kidding. And a lot of people were kind of using the example of the retrofitting, the fire sprinkler retrofitting issue, where it just kept it would get up to the deadline and then the legislature would move it even further, and it had been further down the line. This is something, again, when 98 people die in their beds, the legislature felt very strongly that no, we're not going to move this further away, move this further. People need to be doing this now. Many associations have been reserving and doing the right thing, but everybody needs to. So I would just say, if you were waiting for big changes, well, the 2024 session's coming. It's coming in January. I don't have to do this because they're gonna wipe this off the books. I think the big takeaway is session ended March 8th. It is very much still on the books, and you've got to comply.
Yes, and I would just like to add that absolutely, this is a conversation that's been going on for quite some time. Condominium owners, board members are nervous, scared, whatever the case may be, but this is not something that just happened overnight, and people need to take it seriously. And we need to make sure that we're having those conversations.
I'm glad to hear you say that, Jamie. I would say, from our perspective of a reserve study, our tidbit of advice that we can give is, ultimately, you have to fund this down to the penny. It is not the price of the report. It is the quality of the report that you get. We're actually redoing structural integrity reserve studies that have been done by other companies because they were having a little problems with the understanding of them or the compliance issues. Make sure that you find a firm. There's a lot of good ones out there that can work with you. This is a budget that you have to fund. So it's important that the condominium is involved in that process, and that you're thinking about not only the replacement of items, but the deferred maintenance expensive items to help expand that timeline.
Yeah, Tara, one thing I wanted to say, just on that financing piece, for so long, so many associations, they were playing a game of musical chairs with these units, where you just wanted to not be holding the unit when the special assessment was passed. You wanted to come in and buy a unit when it was, when the previous owner had just, they had done a special assessment, repairs are being done, and then you think, I'm going to live here for 10 years. I'm going to make the equity that I need. It's an investment property. I'll rent it out. I'll do whatever. And then right before, when I start hearing on the pickleball courts or in the elevator whispers about special assessments, I'm going to call my realtor, put it on the market, and get out. And then the next person's going to have to pay it. And so you basically, you've lived there the 10 years without having to pay your portion of the use that you were using of these components. And that is just, now that's not going to be, that's not going to be the case. You're not going to be able to just continue to waive reserves and say, we don't need reserves. Just, I want to keep my monthly fee at $300 a month and no more.
And that's the important thing, is the law just provided the framework. This is going to be regulated and mandated by the insurance and banking industries. We are seeing not only property carriers asking for copies of these reports, but actually liability carriers, because they don't want to be on the hook if the boards do not complete them. So you will not be able to get property or liability insurance without doing these reports. And ultimately, the banks do not want to be left holding the bag. They were left holding the bag prior in the condo crash. They know how much you can afford. They've looked at your taxes. They've looked at your W-2s. They know you can afford your mortgage. They also know if you can or cannot afford a $50,000, $60,000 assessment. So they will not be providing financing. And remember, the value of these units, why did the crash happen? Because you weren't able to get loans for condos. And the same thing will happen. You won't be able to get a loan for condo if it's not compliant. So if you're sitting on a board and you're worried like, oh, I don't know if I can afford to do this structural integrity reserve study or not do it, I can tell you that your unit value will drop substantially if it's not done and it's not done timely and figured out.
Right. And I don't think the enforcement will be from, you know, where Representative Lopez and Jamie mentioned that, you know, let's say we're 40% have been done, 10%, 20. I don't think the enforcement is going to come from DBPR saying, hey, we've noticed you haven't done this. I think where it's going to come is when you go to close and there's a closing, and that bank and that closing agent is going to ask for, where is your, you know, where's your structural integrity reserve study? Where's your milestone? Where are these documents? And you don't have them because the association didn't do them. That's where I think the enforcement is going to come from from the, you know, the marketplace, if that makes any sense.
It absolutely does. And that's why the liability carriers care, because all of a sudden we call it the parade of horribles in condo world, right? Because one thing happens and starts another trigger thing. All of a sudden you're at the pool. I couldn't sell my condo. I lost $1 million because the board didn't do what they were supposed to. Boom, lawsuits happen. And then we end up with liability director and officers policies. So guys, the takeaway is that there is no changes with condo safety. There was some small little tweaks with reporting requirements. One of the things that you have to do for the structural integrity reserve study, now within 45 days of receiving it, you do have to make it a part of your official records, and you need to provide electronic notice to the association that that is part of the official records. Next, we're going to talk about a happier topic. We're going to talk about money, right? Because we said, wow, we're going to need some. House Representative Lopez, can you tell us how many ideas were kicked around? How did you come up with? We've expanded My Florida Home program, and we'll talk about the specifics of that. But before we talk about the specifics, can you talk about how we got there?
Yeah, so I think I met with the speaker early on in the session during committee weeks, and he said to me, look, what are your ideas on insurance? And I said, well, I got two ideas. One that I would have really preferred it to go further than it did, and I need to study it more, is of course the fact that in Section 713 of the Condominium Act, it has an insurance provision that says you must insure to the full replacement value of the building. And I am arguing, and there was some argument, there were some positions taken as well with residential homes. So my idea came from the fact that there was a bill that was being floated that said that for residential homes, maybe you only had to insure for the amount that you had your mortgage, so that it covered the bank's responsibility and gave you the ability to make a business decision. I said, well, wait. The My Safe Florida Homes has been incredibly successful, like wildly. We've put in now $500 million for single family home and townhomes to take advantage of a free inspection service of their roofs and exterior doors and windows. They get a report, and if the report has recommended improvements to the property that will harden it, then they can apply for a $10,000 grant at the state. So I said to the speaker, why are all condominiums always sort of the stepchildren of every conversation we have around residential homes? These are our homes. I live in a condo. This is my home. And so he said, all right, I'm going to give you authority to develop a pilot to see if it works. Because as you can well imagine, A single family home is quite different than vertical living, where you have to harden the entire building, right? Not just a home. So what I was able to accomplish was for any condominium 15 miles from the coast, the pilot would be for any condo association to apply for a free inspection. And the way you apply for that is either a majority vote of the board or a majority vote of the qualified owners in the building. So what we said was, this is wonderful. We can get started with at least an inspection of the building. Then of the report, if the report comes back and it says, look, you're able to make some improvements here that would harden your building, because insurance companies told us for those buildings that are being hardened, they're getting a significant insurance reduction. So we said, okay, well, that makes sense, except that, we gotta first let everybody in the building know. And this is a challenge. I want everyone to hear that this may be a challenge I may have to address next year, but you have to have 100% participation in order to apply for the grant. Now, many condo boards have told me they've had a difficult time getting a majority of people to agree that today is Wednesday. So for them, the majority vote in order to apply for the grant is what is kind of causing a little bit of a challenge. We'll have to look at that after the first year to see how many people did get the inspection, which only requires a majority vote of the board or the majority vote of the qualified owners. And then we'll see, was it that they couldn't get the unanimous vote of every unit holder? Then that may be something I have to look to change to the majority. But
Vicki, I can tell you from an engineering perspective, because we do the wind mitigation reports, I understand why you had to do that, because ultimately when we're doing a wind mitigation report for insurance, if 100% of those doors and windows do not meet the Miami-Dade rating, then we cannot give them the checkbox and you don't get the discount. So
no, that's true, but
it's much easier to understand. So like doing all the doors and windows does make a lot of sense, because if you don't do them, you don't get the discount.
Well, no, we didn't say that you didn't have to have the whole building hardened, but remember, we're giving money and the owners have to also contribute. So the problem is that in order to apply for the grant, which is up to $175,000 for the whole building, which by the way, will get you nothing. It's really a drop in the bucket if you know how much it costs to do one sliding glass door that's impact on these buildings. The question was, does everyone agree that if they get the grant money, they also have to put in money? That's why it wasn't that the building doesn't, we understand you can't let one or two owners do it. That's not going to cut it. The entire building must be hardened, but there is a financial impact to every single owner. And that's why they required the unanimous vote. And so we'll see. I mean, honestly, I don't know if they're going to be able to get unanimous votes, and I don't know how much 175,000 will help. It will probably help my 3, 4, 5, 6-story buildings, right? Maybe have 54 units. That may be a significant help. But for a high rise with 42 floors, it may not be, it may not make a difference. So it's a pilot, so we could study it. And I think it's important to see because, a lot of the buildings in my district, for instance, are not high rises. They are really much smaller buildings, and they are the older ones that maybe can in fact benefit from this grant. I mean, that everyone should apply for the free inspection, because that's going to give you an idea of where you are today. Like, what is the condition of your roof and your exterior doors and windows? It's kind of like you're collecting data to make some decisions moving forward. And I know the SERS does that, but this is really very specific to the high risk areas of a building, should it be impacted by a storm. So I'm telling everyone, at the very least, get your free inspection and then just make a decision based on the report you get from that inspection as to which way you want to move forward.
So quickly, I want to go over how it works and an example. So we talked about the votes and the transparency. The president actually has to sign the application with penalty of perjury. It needs to be put in your minutes. So everything that's come out of this session is a lot about transparency. So for roofs, you can get up to 50% of the project. The association or the unit owner has to put in $1 for every $2 given by the state. It's $11 per square maximum on the roof and $1,000 per unit max. So on the windows, it's a little bit more. It's $1,500 per unit max, but $750 up to any opening. First, we have to say, are we 15 miles of the coast? Check, they've done that. Did they go ahead and give the disclosure form out to all the unit owners? They've done that. They got the majority vote from the membership. They have 100% participation. They signed the disclosure form and put it in the meeting minutes. After the grant was accepted and they voted, after they voted to participate, you also have to give notice to the unit owners that say we passed that vote within 14 days. And then you have to submit a signed application. So once you've done all that, which can be some of the biggest challenges, let's look about how that comes out with actually dollars and cents. So on the roof, for example, if it's 84 squares, it's 100 square feet in a square. So if it's $800 a square, which is pretty much average for like a modified flat roof, that project would be $67,000. We can say, okay, yes, it's under $11 a square because it's less than $1,100 a square. So it's under 92,000. So we're good on that. Is the number, what's 50% of the project? The 50% of the project is 33,600. So in this example, even though the roof is 67,000, you can only get 50% of the project. So you could get $33,000 free. $33,000, it's less than $1,000 per unit, and it's less than 175,000. So your association in this example would be eligible for $33,600 for the roof, assuming you made all those other qualifications. If you also wanted to do your windows, you can also do your windows and doors, but you have to do all the windows and doors because physics tells us if one is not hardened and it blows out, the whole building then becomes susceptible. So in this example, if the windows, each unit has 4 windows and 2 sliders, and the windows are $700 each, but the 2 sliders are $1,500 each, where we're triggering, right? That's too much per opening. The max you can get is $750 per opening. So in this example, you could get your 4 windows, $750 each for the doors, would be $4,300 per unit. If you take $4,300 per unit that's eligible, that's $172,000. If we cut that in half, because 50% of the projects, that's $86,000, but that's too much per unit, right? So the max that you can get is $1,500. So in this example, those 40 units could be eligible for up to $1,500 a piece. So that means they could get $60,000 towards their windows. So you can get $33,000 for the windows, $60,000, I'm sorry, $33,000 for the roof, $60,000 for the windows and doors. And that's a total of $93,000 for the community because it's under the 175 threshold.
And
But
then Tara, doesn't that also help? And Tara, doesn't that then also help you on the wind mitigation? On your
Yes,
insurance?
that's the point. Then
Oh.
then we can come out and we can check those boxes on the savings, and all of a sudden these insurance premiums that are going through the roof now come down. So you're getting money to help you get over the hump, and then you're saving money with the insurance premium.
And
So
you're making your building safer. I mean, to boot.
safer. So it's worth going through the struggle. Jamie, you're going to be in charge of getting your boards through all that struggle. We can help you as well. But there is $30 million out there. So if you are 15 miles from the coast and you think this is obtainable at all, it all happens through education and talking and transparency and getting people on board with that.
And I think that it's important that everyone know the bill has not been signed yet, but the governor is incredibly interested in this bill. He's also, when he signs the legislation, it will become effective July 1st. So a lot of people are asking me, how can we apply? How can we apply? So it's going to take the Department of Financial Services like a month or two to get it all organized. It's not like they're not working on it right now. They are. They're getting geared up. But as soon as it has been established by the Department of Financial Services, they have money to do a marketing campaign so that everyone will be notified in condominiums that the program is now ready to be utilized. And of course, many representatives, I know I certainly will be putting it on my social media. So I would suggest you check back with the Department of Financial Services website every week after July 1st, and they will have exactly how you apply for this.
There's 20–30% of all the condos in the state within Dade County. So I'd like to share a little bit about this. So if you are a property manager you're aware of this, because we're talking to associations every day. We're telling them about this in Dade and they don't know it exists.
I'll take it, since I have had to answer this question everywhere I go when I speak to condo owners. So, many of our condominiums are residences for people that really are retired and are on fixed income, and they're being hit with assessments that, are between $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and some even higher. And so what Dade County, the Miami-Dade County Commission decided to set aside a revolving loan fund that allows up to $50,000 per unit of an interest-free loan. It must be for your primary residence. There is no credit score. That's something that everyone asks. It's really tied to AMI, to the average medium income. And in Miami-Dade, you see that it's $101,000 for a single person or $115,000 for a household. The unit is collateral, and you have up to 40 years to pay it. If you sell it, that has obviously first rights to be repaid from the proceeds of the sale. But this 40 million revolving fund account this has been wildly, obviously successful here. And I think I want to say about Miami-Dade County being sort of like a leader in all of this in terms of re-inspections and are what I call milestone inspections that are known here as recertifications, and this particular loan program, because the state was very clear that it was not a bank and it was not going to bail anyone out. But it's nice to see that where we have so many condominiums, the local government said, listen, we can't have a crisis where people are on the street. And so I think that this program has really helped many people. And if you look at the incomes levels, it's not just retirees, it's a lot of young professionals who may or may not be able to actually afford these assessments that they're getting now. So I think it's been, a very progressive thought, which I hope across the state. And I would say if anyone is on this webinar that it doesn't live in Miami-Dade County, the first thing you ought to be doing is going to your county commissioners and saying, we ought to be modeling the same program that Miami-Dade has, because I think we're not just seeing it here in Miami-Dade, we're seeing people not be able to afford their assessments all over the state. And if you're on this call or on this webinar, I think you've got to go see your county commission about two things. Not this revolving loan fund for assessments, but also encourage them to call the Miami-Dade Building Department and get the ordinance. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's all been done. The forms are done. I mean, it is probably the most sophisticated and well-organized recertification of buildings. And I don't think you need to be, scratching your head as to where you start. Start by making a call to Miami-Dade County, get the ordinance, review it, and make it, obviously tailor it to your community. But there's no reason why you should be overburdened, if you will, with the new mandate of the milestone inspections.
If you are in Broward or Dade or Boynton, anywhere that requires a recertification, it is a higher standard, so you don't have to get a milestone. We get a lot of calls requesting milestones, thinking they need both. You do not need both. The recertification is the higher standard. It is the milestone in your area. In Miami, you have to do structural, electrical, thermal, and parking lot illumination. In Broward, right now, you have to do electrical and structural. And other than that, it's city by city having different regulations. So it's important to understand where you live. It's specific to the building official. They can make it shorter, they can make it tighter, they can't make it longer. Let's talk a little bit about governance now, because there are new laws that everyone needs to know and to live by. We're going to break these down into 4 different sections that came out. When I read this, it's just mind-boggling to me how we can have condos for 40, 50, 60 years old, and these laws are just getting on the books. That's a really common sense approach. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this, Representative Lopez? And
Yes. Absolutely. So we'll start with management companies that at the state level are known as Community Association Managers, or CAMs, as we affectionately refer to them. So this was born out of complaints by condo boards and condo owners that there were some issues with CAMs that had never been addressed before in statute. So we decided, based on what we were hearing, that we would put a little more transparency and a little more teeth into the role of the CAMs in condo world. And so now, if they are terminated, if a community association manager is terminated, they have 20 business days from the day of request or termination to return all official records. I had no idea this was a necessary evil that we'd have to put into statute, but apparently CAMs were running off with the records. Either they were upset that they'd been terminated and never returning them. So on the 21st day, the consequence is $1,000 penalty per day. So that's a hefty consequence, and I think it will get people's attention that you've got 20 days to return the records that rightfully belong to the boards. We also heard, we heard so many complaints about property managers having conflicts of interest, either in businesses that they own, businesses that they have a share in, their family members, their close friends. They were giving the business to everyone. And of course, there were some, I think, probably complaints, although they weren't verified, that there were kickbacks happening as well in these particular arrangements. So we decided that every CAM must disclose all of their conflicts of interest in their contract. So at the time that they are entering into a contract with a condo board, they have to list off all of their conflicts of interest. If the CAM has services, and let's assume that it's okay, like, they say, look, I have a friend who's in this business. If they recommend that business, they must, and this is important, they have to get multiple bids for any items over $2,500. If they have a conflict of interest, or they've already disclosed the conflict. And those disclosed conflicts of interest have to be disclosed on contracts, agendas, minutes, as well as attached to the contracts. You have to attach the contract to the minutes so that anyone who's reviewing those minutes will see, oh, there's the contract and there's the disclosed conflict of interest. The contracts that have conflicts of interest require a 2/3 vote of the present board and those that are present at the meeting. So it only takes 20% vote for the non-disclosed contracts to be canceled. So let's assume for a second that someone did not disclose the conflict of interest and that it is found that they had a conflict. They can, by a 20% vote of the membership, actually cancel that contract. So talk about transparency, talk about clarity. I think this was the one place for CAMs that it was very important to really identify and make clear.
Travis, give me some feedback on, is everyone being punished because of South Florida?
I look at it and say, if you're doing the things like Jamie said, where you are disclosing everything, you are very circumspect about various relationships and arrangements you have, it's very much out in the open, or you don't even have them, then I don't think nothing in this, in any of the new changes, to me, if you're doing the right things, it's like the criminal penalties. You have to be knowingly and willfully, repeatedly doing some pretty bad things in order for it to impact you. If you're doing the right things, all in all, I mean, honestly, this conflicts of interest stuff came from, we had passed legislation years ago where board members had to deal with conflicts of interest, with disclosure and all, and votes, et cetera, et cetera. And the thought was, with Representative Lopez and Senator Bradley, and they're looking at, literally grand jury reports about activity. And they said, if that's good enough for boards, volunteer, unlicensed, board member, lay people board members, then we can apply that same principle to sophisticated, licensed management professionals. And so, I know Jamie, I know her business. I don't, there's nothing in here that would cause me, if I was looking at it as, like their general counsel, and say, well, this is going to be a huge problem. But we will keep an eye to make sure there is no inadvertent,
So really, this was really meant for those that are bad actors. And, I have to stress this because there are criminal penalties in this bill. And I think that the concern was for condo owners and condo board members, who's going to want to serve on a board? And I keep saying to everybody, look, you're going to be educated on the law. So if you are a good actor and you want to do the right thing and you want to comply with the law, it should be easy. Because to Jamie's point, look, everyone's human. You can make a mistake. That is not going to rise to the level of a criminal penalty. It'll rise to it if you consistently, persistently, willfully want to do something against the law. So I think for the vast majority of people, it's a thankless job in many cases, but you know what? The vast majority are trying to do a good job. This bill was really to address all those that are not.
Yeah, and what's going to come into play is honestly, with a management firm and having portfolio managers where they have several accounts, being able to supervise and really review what they're doing to make sure that these things are being done correctly and that they're, everything is in writing and that conflicts of interest are being addressed. This way, we can make sure that everyone's doing the right thing, which means, the need for probably more staff and those costs obviously will be absorbed by the associations.
Right.
So official records.
Yeah. I want to say, Tara, that the Department of Business and Professional Regulation said the #1 complaint that they got was condo owners requesting records and being completely ignored or being told that they can't have them. So we decided, look, let's take the condo board out of the middle of it. Let us now reduce the threshold, which was at 100. If you had a condominium with 150 units, you're required to have a website. We've now dropped it to 25 units. We're also saying that you can't say you've lost the records. That was a really big, it's hard to believe that anyone thought that they could get away with saying the records have been lost. Now they must make a very strong effort to try to obtain them or not recreate them, because that was a question. Are they recreating them? No, they're recovering them, which is a very different verb. We also said in statute that there's a checklist now that we've created that says all the records that have to be on the website. And I'll tell you that Miami-Dade County is actually their ordinance that they are updating now is going to put even more records up on the website, going to require that. But we required certain records that we think people have been wanting and haven't been able to get at. There are some enhanced penalties for non-compliance with this because this was really where the rubber hits the road. We will only know if the websites are working if we don't hear from condo owners that they can't access the records. Then we know it's working. If we get complaints again that they can't get records, that will mean that we will have to audit some of these websites to ensure that they are complying with the checklist of records that need to be placed there. And of course, associates can't waive reporting for consecutive years. That was also an issue that was taking place rampantly, especially in South Florida. So we believe now that everyone will be able to access the records, download the records, and quite frankly, attached to that, if you will, was a piece of the legislation that required condo boards to meet at least 4 times, because a lot of people that did get records and reviewed them had no forum in which to ask questions about the records. So they must now have 4 meetings a year where members will be allowed, condo owners will be allowed to answer questions of the condo owners. They also have to now, they cannot vote on a contract unless it's attached to the agenda and made available prior to the meeting. Can't tell you how many times that's happened where someone shows up at a meeting and they're talking about a contract no one's even seen. And then during the meeting, they have to discuss any progress of construction projects and the revenue and expenses for the year. So we really wanted them to understand that you need to know that some condo boards weren't even meeting. So that was a challenge. Then when they were meeting, they might meet once a year for their elections and never talk to anybody about anything. So no one ever knew. They knew that they could see scaffolding. They knew that there was work being done. They had no idea what the contract said, how much it was costing them, and what work was being done and when it was going to be finished. So we believe that this will actually meet the threshold and really take out most of the complaints that condo owners were having with condo boards outside of election fraud.
That's what it's all about, right? It's implementing the new way of condo living. All this is, in 5 years from now, we're going to look back and say, how do we let it get where these buildings were 40 years old and there was $19,000 in the bank for reserves on a 7-story high rise, right? It's not going to happen. And it's going to be a fundamental shift and a shakeup. And I can tell you, everyone on this webinar, we're fully dedicated on doing whatever we can do as legislators and as vendors and as management companies to really bring the boards into this new way. And it's not going to be easy. And there's going to be a lot of blood, sweat, and tears along the way. But once we get there, it's the only way that we can survive. And it's such 2 million residents, more than that, in the state of Florida living in condos. These things have to be addressed. So the last piece of topic we're going to talk about in the bill was voting requirements.
There's been so much election fraud. And again, you know, I'm only focused in listening to what I hear in Miami-Dade County. That may not be the case. And quite frankly, when I spoke to the secretary of DBPR last week, she said to me, Vicky, the bulk of the complaints about all these problems is coming from South Florida. So, you know, unfortunately, I happen to represent a district where there's lots of problems, but vis-a-vis voting, what they were doing is if you were delinquent on your condominium fees, they were not allowing you to be on the ballot or vote. So now we're saying, look, you didn't give people enough advance notice. Some people did not know they were even delinquent. So they now have to give a 90-day notice in order to give people an opportunity to pay their fee so that they can either be on the ballot or they can vote. Because remember, it's a 60-day notification for the election. So we said, look, you get 30-day notice before the ballots are sent out, or the notice for elections are sent out, so that people could have an opportunity to fix what it might be wrong in terms of not paying their condo fees. We also did a little bit of hurricane protection in this bill. So you have to record certification of attesting to your vote to mandate the hurricane windows and doors. So I had a building in Key Biscayne where half the building owners had hardened their exterior doors and windows, and the other half hadn't. And when the board tried to take a vote to harden the rest of it, they couldn't get a majority vote because those that had already hardened theirs says, we're not going to pay twice. We're not going to pay for the ones that we did, and now you're going to ask us to pay for theirs. So we clarified it in statute that you can give credit to those that have already hardened theirs, which was a huge issue. And then on electronic voting. So the current statute allows for any ballots to be sent either by US mail or electronic voting. So a lot of these bad condo boards have insisted on sending abroad US mail. In my area, in my district, most of the owners don't live in their units, and many of them live in South America and in Europe. So they were getting their ballots mailed to them US mail, and they were never getting the ballot, or the ballot was arriving after the election. So now, as a result of a case here on Brickell, we towards the end of session decided that if a condo owner requests their ballot electronically, it must be given to them and they must be able to vote electronically, because so many owners were being disenfranchised because they're not able to get a ballot. And it wasn't that they didn't want to be engaged, they just couldn't get the ballot in time to vote. So those were the three highlights of what really we looked at. And these were, again, as Travis said, it was born of all of the complaints that we've been hearing, even up to now that I'm having complaints, and it's pages of complaints, people. It's not just, they don't give me records. They don't give me records. They're under election fraud. The assessments are proving to be fraudulent. I mean, it's all in one building. So you can well imagine the challenge we have. As a matter of fact, I actually called the secretary to tell her that I thought she'd have to send a task force, create a corruption task force, and bring it to South Florida so she could answer to all of the complaints that I can't mediate and that I can't handle. So that is one of the reasons why House Bill 1021 was such an important piece of legislation, because it really did respond to many of the complaints that we were getting.
It's such a great example of how the community is really shaping the law. There's so many things that go through and we're like, wait, how does this even apply? But from our perspective, and I'm sure from Jamie's perspective, being in the trenches of condominiums, a lot of these small little tweaks will help unit owners that didn't feel that they had a voice before. This is going to be the most amount of work for all the unit owners and managers out there. But hopefully the most amount of return.
I agree 100%. I think that the board education is going to help management companies, managers. Board members will understand their roles and understand our roles. So I believe that it is just a plus all the way around.
And Travis, can you kind of talk about what they have to do now versus what they had to do before this law compared to what they have to do after this law? So if people are watching this webinar and they don't fully understand the differences, the before and after.
So yes, so when you're elected to the board, you are told by law, you know, within 90 days of being elected to this board, you have to take a education course, and it's delineated as to, you know, what topics are covered by that, et cetera. Then it says, or you can sign this affidavit that says you've read and understand all of your bylaws. So literally, the vast majority were just turning in this certificate. I was elected president of my board back when we did turnover like 4 years ago, and I happen to know, you know, about how some of this works, but literally we were on this, it was during COVID, so we were on this Zoom meeting, and within a minute of getting elected to the board, I get this, you know, notice from the manager saying to all 5 now new board members, I put in the certificate, you just need to sign that, return it to me. And so they didn't know, they didn't know that they were supposed to educate. And I said, well, wait, you could do that, or you could take an education course. They're like, we're not doing that. So literally it was just, that's the way everything was. This says and so basically the law took away that, or you can sign their certificate. It says you're going to take this education. So it would be 4 hours of education on you know, budget, on how to run the meetings, all of these different things. And then every year after that, when you're on the board, you would need to take a 1 hour like continuing education course, like a refresher on anything that may have happened. So like if it was next year, you know, they would say, okay, well, you know, this House Bill 1021 passed, here are the new, you know, updates, and that would be your hour so that you're kept up to date.
It's important to note as well is that we typically use HOAs and condo associations, those terms interchangeably, and they're not interchangeable. HOAs are governed under Section 720 of the law, and condominiums are governed under the Condominium Act, which is Section 718. However, you may know, and it may be part of your existence, is I have condominium associations who share shared common elements, and in some cases, they have set up an HOA in 720 to actually oversee that. So there's been conflicts because you would think that 718 and 720 would mirror themselves. They do not. So, and then there is the condominium structure where 2 buildings have shared common elements, and they have a nonprofit corporation set up for those. So there's lots of different structures, but I like to caution everyone that if you've got a condo association, you'll be looking at Section 718.
Condo websites need to be up and running.
So we gave them till 2026. We knew that would be maybe a difficult thing to do, especially for some of the smaller ones that don't have the resources. So we said, look, just get them up, you know, get going. You know, it's funny how Travis likes to say, we tell you that it's coming You don't wait till the last minute to hire a website designer. I know in some cases, property managers can also provide a server. And, you know, I did hear some complaints about that. What happens to your website when, if you get rid of the property manager? But I will say this, I think everyone has to just do what's best for them. There's no one size fits all, but you absolutely have to get started on this project, because it's not just getting the website set up, it's getting all those documents up into the cloud. So it's a job, and we're grateful that, we heard that they would need some more time. We gave them more time.
A question from Christine Cabrera. Do you think the new board member requirements are going to make it difficult to get board members on small condos, like 10 units or less?
So I don't necessarily think that it'll be difficult to recruit board members. Where I have seen it being difficult is in buildings where there have been lots of problems with condo boards. Nobody wants to get into the mix. Nobody wants to have to pick up that mess. And I did hear from one woman who said, I want to get off my board, but nobody wants to serve. So what do I do? And that could be a new problem that we have. But I think that was because her building has so many issues. Who wants to step into that? You know, if it's a well-run board and they haven't had any issues, I don't think they'll have problems finding board members.
And I think the
board is going to be a well-run board, right? That's the whole idea. We're not going to lower our standards for the law to make it easier for people. This is going to be more difficult for everyone. That is the message here, guys. It's more difficult to live in a condo. It's more expensive to live in a condo. But if we don't do this, the alternative is worse.
I'm optimistic that it'll be better.
Me too.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We run a little bit over time. Remember, we are Stone Building Solutions. We're the one-stop shop for all of your reporting needs. We do offer engineering, which includes milestone inspections. We are problem solvers. We write RFPs for construction projects. We offer construction monitoring. We do the structural integrity reserve studies, the regular reserve studies, insurance valuation appraisals, wind mitigation reports, and property damage claims. You can get a proposal at any time. All you have to do is email us at info@stonebldg.com, and we're in every micro market across Florida. So we're happy to serve you with all of your community needs. We are offering monthly webinars where we're discussing topics like these. So please follow us on our YouTube channel at Stone Building Solutions. And we hope everyone has a wonderful 2024.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
It's a
everyone.
pleasure.